I didn't expect the courtroom to fall silent. Not the thick, echoing kind of silence born from fear or awe, but the stunned, breath-held quiet of people collectively realizing they had misjudged a situation entirely. I stood there, hands clasped, years of strain lined across my face, while my ex-husband, Daniel Reeves, leaned back in his chair with the smug confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He had worn that same expression for months, since the day he told me, with a smirk I can still picture with painful clarity, "You'll leave with nothing, Margaret. Not a cent. Not this house. Not your share. You walked away, so you get what you get." Yet now, in this courtroom, it was finally my turn to watch him unravel. The judge adjusted her glasses, studied the stack of documents my attorney and I had assembled over almost a year of methodical, quiet work. She turned to Daniel. Her voice was calm, but her words cut with the precision of a scalpel. "Mr. Reeves, these account balances, along with the recorded transfers, appear inconsistent with the financial disclosure you submitted." Daniel's face drained of color. Every ounce of his arrogance evaporated in a heartbeat. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, glanced toward his attorney, who leaned forward, visibly bewildered. But the judge wasn't finished. "The court will need you to explain the movement of funds from the marital investment account into the private accounts listed here." She tapped the papers. The sound carried like a gavel. The spectators, other couples waiting for their hearings, a few board attorneys, 2 interns near the wall, leaned in. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The truth was speaking for me. But what no one in that room knew, not yet, was that this moment had been carefully built. Slowly, quietly, brick by brick. They didn't know about the nights I sat awake at my kitchen table, sorting through paperwork he didn't think I could understand. They didn't know about the conversations with accountants, the months of documenting, the trail he never realized he had left behind. They didn't know that this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about truth, about reclaiming the years I had spent ignored, underestimated, and dismissed. And as the judge continued reading aloud the numbers Daniel had believed he'd buried, I let myself remember exactly how this all started. It didn't begin with a courtroom. It began at my sister's kitchen table, with a cup of tea I could barely hold steady. Because before I became the woman standing here, calm, ready, unshakable, I was someone else entirely. Someone who had trusted a man who believed that love could be leveraged, that loyalty meant silence, and that my age made me too clueless to notice the cracks forming beneath us. What I couldn't know, what I couldn't possibly imagine, was how far those cracks would go. And what I was about to discover. I hadn't even told the judge the most shocking part yet, the part that would make the entire courtroom gasp. My name is Margaret Reeves, though I've recently reclaimed my maiden name, Margaret Ellison. I'm 61 years old, and I've lived long enough to understand that life rarely falls apart all at once. It unravels slowly, thread by thread, until one day you look down and realize you're holding nothing but the loose ends of what used to be your world. I wasn't always this composed. I wasn't always this steady on my feet. At one time, I believed stability meant staying quiet, staying agreeable, smoothing the edges of conflict so others could stay comfortable. And for most of my marriage, that was my role. The steady wife behind a man who thrived on being admired. My life before all this wasn't glamorous, but it was full. I worked as a high school librarian for 28 years before retiring early. I loved my job. I loved the rhythm of it, the smell of old books, the quiet respect students showed when they stepped into my little kingdom of shelves. I loved being the one who listened, who noticed when a child needed a gentle word or a quiet place. Retirement was supposed to be peaceful. Daniel had encouraged it, or at least, that's how it appeared at the time. He said we could travel more, relax, enjoy the fruits of our labor. But looking back, I now understand why he wanted me home, why he wanted me financially dependent, why he insisted that he handle all investments, to keep things simple. Because a dependent woman is easier to control. Still, even then, I didn't see myself as a victim. I was simply a woman in the later chapters of her life trying to build a gentle future with a man she believed she knew. I tended my garden. I baked bread on Sundays. I hosted my nieces when they wanted a quiet weekend away. And in those small moments, I felt grounded. But love, as I learned painfully, can blind you to things you should always keep an eye on. And when I discovered what Daniel had done, what he had been doing for years, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not revenge in the traditional sense. Resolve. A calm, powerful, unshakable resolve. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I simply looked at the truth, breathed in, and said to myself, I will handle this. I will handle this the right way. Because at 61, I no longer felt the need to burn bridges or break things on my way out. I understood something Daniel never bothered to learn. Real power is quiet. Real justice doesn't shout. And when I walked out of our home for the last time, I left with only my clothes, my documents, and my name. But I did not leave empty. Not even close. What I found the day before I left, hidden in Daniel's home office, would change everything. Family has always been my anchor, even when I didn't realize how desperately I needed one. My younger sister, Elaine, has a kitchen that always smells faintly of vanilla and warm sugar, because she bakes when she's anxious. And the day I arrived with a suitcase and trembling hands, her kitchen smelled like an entire bakery. She didn't ask questions at first. She simply hugged me, set a cup of tea in front of me, and waited. That was her gift. Patience. My family had always liked Daniel. He was charming in that polished, practiced way. He brought wine to gatherings, bragged about his business ventures, helped my brother-in-law fix the garage door once and made sure everyone knew about it. He was the kind of man who thrived on admiration, and he'd found plenty of it within my family. But admiration has a short lifespan once truth enters the room. When I told Elaine what I'd found in his home office, the hidden folder of statements, the transfers, the secret accounts, she didn't gasp or curse or dramatize the moment. She simply reached across the table and said, "Tell me everything." And I did. 4 hours, I laid out each piece, each document I had photocopied when Daniel was away on business. Transfers that didn't make sense. Withdrawals he had claimed were routine. Investment accounts I had never heard of. Signed forms with my signature forged on them. My niece, Lily, sharp-eyed, 26, and studying forensic accounting of all things, stopped by later that evening. Elaine, without explanation, handed her the folder. Lily opened it, scanned 2 pages, and looked up at me with a seriousness I'd never seen in her. "Aunt Margaret, this isn't just suspicious. This is intentional. He's been draining the marital assets for years." That night, surrounded by the people who loved me, something inside me settled. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. My family became my silent support. Not loud, not meddling, not pushing me toward choices I wasn't ready for. Just present. Just steady. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone. But being surrounded by support didn't erase the weight of what it meant. Daniel had been preparing for a divorce long before I realized our marriage was breaking. And that meant his betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was planned. Calculated. And if he had planned so carefully to take everything from me, then I needed to plan even more carefully to protect myself. The next morning, Lily told me she found something in those documents, something Daniel never expected anyone to see. It was Lily who spotted the detail that made everything fall into place. We sat at Elaine's dining table again, papers spread out like puzzle pieces. She tapped a page with her pen. "Here," she said. "This transfer isn't just strange. It's illegal." The amount wasn't enormous, just under $10,000, but the timing was unmistakable. It had happened the same week I retired. Daniel had encouraged me to leave my job early, telling me it was financially safe because of our investments. And just days after I signed the retirement paperwork, he siphoned funds out of what I had believed was our joint long-term savings. Except it wasn't ours. Not anymore. As we traced the transfers across accounts, the picture grew clearer and darker. Daniel had slowly drained our joint assets over the span of 5 years. A small withdrawal here, a discreet transfer there. Always just under thresholds that would trigger automatic flags. Always tucked away into accounts I didn't know existed. But what cut deepest wasn't the money. It was the realization that he had shaped our entire future while planning for my absence from it. The vacations he said we'd take? Lies. The renovations we'd postponed until markets improved? Lies. The retirement he encouraged? A strategic move. He hadn't just betrayed me financially. He had hollowed out the life we had built, brick by brick, while smiling at me across dinner tables and telling me he loved me. I sat there, staring at the documents, feeling a cold ache settle deep in my bones. But I didn't cry. Shock has a way of numbing you before grief can take hold. Elaine placed her hand on mine. You need a lawyer. She was right. I found one the next day. A woman named Rachel Porter, mid-40s, sharp as a blade, with a calm demeanor that reminded me of myself. She listened without interrupting, flipping through the folder Lily and I assembled. When she finished, she leaned back and folded her hands. Margaret, this is not just a divorce. This is asset concealment. He has committed financial misconduct. And we are going to gather everything we need to hold him accountable. Her confidence steadied me. But Daniel, of course, believed he was invincible. When I finally confronted him, days later, when I went back home to collect the last of my belongings, he laughed. He actually laughed. You can't prove anything, he said. And even if you try, you'll leave with nothing. I made sure of it. He said it with such certainty, such arrogance, that for a moment I almost doubted myself. But the mistake he made, the fatal miscalculation, was believing I would break. What he didn't know was that I already had proof. And more importantly, I had time, patience, and a team willing to help me uncover the rest. It was during that search, 3 weeks later, that I found the document that would become Daniel's undoing. The document that changed everything wasn't hidden in a safe or locked drawer. Daniel was smarter than that. He knew better than to leave obvious clues in obvious places. But he had one fatal flaw. He assumed I would never look. I found it in a cardboard box labeled Old Tax Records, in the upstairs hall closet. I wasn't searching for evidence that day. I was simply gathering the last of my things while he was at work, trying my best to keep the process civil. But when the box tipped over and papers scattered across the floor, a folder slid out that didn't match the rest. It was newer, crisp, and in Daniel's handwriting, on the front, were the words, "Contingency Plan." Inside was a printout of a spreadsheet listing assets. Some I knew about, most I didn't. Even more damning, notes on how he intended to protect those assets in the event of unexpected marital dissolution. He had planned not just for my exit, but for stripping me of every possible claim. I sat on the floor, folder open, feeling a slow, steady burn rise in my chest. Not rage. Not despair. Something else. Purpose. The next day, I took the folder to Rachel. She scanned it with sharpened eyes, her jaw tightening slightly. "This," she said, "is intentional concealment. And this changes everything." Over the next months, the investigation became almost a part-time job. Rachel coordinated forensic accountants, subpoenaed records, tracked electronic transfers, combed through every account Daniel thought he had hidden. She guided me through the process with steady professionalism. I learned more about finance in those months than I had in 60 years of living. Lily helped, too. She spent nights at Elaine's, cross-referencing numbers with caffeine-fueled precision. She explained transfers, shell accounts, tax discrepancies. She taught me how to read patterns. And the more we uncovered, the more I realized. Daniel had cornered himself without knowing it. He'd left a breadcrumb trail. Every transfer. Every forged signature. Every unexplained withdrawal. Every movement from joint accounts to private ones. It was all there. His confidence, The very thing he believed protected him had made him sloppy. Meanwhile, Daniel continued living as if nothing were wrong. He bought a new car, took weekend trips, dined out with friends, bragged loudly about how simple his divorce would be because she doesn't know anything about finance. His arrogance wasn't just insulting, it was fuel. Because every time he underestimated me, I worked harder. And every time he gloated, the truth grew closer to the surface. By the time Rachel prepared the final evidence packet, it was nearly 3 inches thick. She slid it across her desk toward me. "This," she said softly, "is more than enough." I stared at it. My quiet justice, wrapped in paper and ink. But then Rachel added something that made my pulse quicken. There was one more discovery, the biggest one yet, coming from a subpoenaed account we hadn't reviewed. The morning Rachel called me, her voice held a tone I hadn't heard before, interest edged with something like astonishment. "Margaret," she said, "you need to come in. We received the final bank records. One account in particular. You'll want to see this yourself." When I arrived, she didn't waste time. She handed me a single sheet of paper. A single account. A single balance. Nearly $240,000. Funds transferred over multiple years. Each transfer carefully timed to coincide with periods when Daniel told me we needed to tighten our belts. Family trips we cancelled. Repairs we postponed. Gifts I thought we couldn't afford. Even the small restrictions, the grocery budgets, the simple living lectures, the insistence that my retirement had put strain on us. He hadn't just hidden assets. He had made me feel guilty for his own greed. Rachel watched my face carefully. "This account was opened in your name, without your knowledge." The room seemed to tilt, but I forced myself steady. "My name. Yes. Forged signature. He funneled money into it so it wouldn't appear on his records. And because it was under your name, he planned to blame you if it was discovered." I felt something inside me shift, not a crack, but a click, as if a lock had finally opened. This wasn't just deceit. This was cruelty. And suddenly, all the nights of quiet investigation, all the meetings, all the papers spread across Elaine's table, they crystallized into clarity. For months, I had been uncovering truth. Now it was time to act on it. I looked at Rachel. "I'm ready to take this to court." She nodded once, slow and deliberate. "And we're ready to win." The days leading to the hearing felt strangely calm. I didn't pace or worry or second-guess myself. I tended Elaine's herb garden. I read in the evenings. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Because I knew something Daniel did not. He had destroyed our marriage long before I left. But he had no idea how thoroughly he had destroyed his own case. On the day of the hearing, as I walked into the courthouse, I felt a kind of peace. Not victory, just certainty. Elaine squeezed my hand. Lily gave me a nod, serious and proud. Daniel stood in the hallway, leaning casually against the wall, confident as ever. He had a new watch. New suit. Same smug expression. "You ready to lose?" he whispered as I passed. I didn't answer. Because I knew that in a matter of minutes, his world was about to shift beneath him. And I wasn't the one about to fall. The judge opened the folder Rachel handed her, and what she read first wiped the smile off Daniel's face instantly. When the judge began reading the account balances, Daniel's reaction was almost cinematic. His confident smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. But when she read the name on the secret account, the one opened in my name, his face drained of color entirely. "Mr. Reeves," the judge said, voice steady, "you claimed in your affidavit that your wife had concealed assets. Yet you opened this account in her name without her knowledge." Daniel stammered. Actually stammered. That's not. Those funds were. I can explain." His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. But the judge raised a hand for silence. "Furthermore," she continued, The pattern of transfers from your declared accounts into the concealed ones indicates intentional misconduct. Daniel shifted in his seat, shoulders tensing, hands gripping the armrests. I sat motionless. The judge read more. Each sentence was a nail in the coffin of his credibility. Each figure she cited tightened the noose he had tied around himself. Finally, she set the papers down. In light of the evidence, she said, the court finds that Mr. Reeves deliberately attempted to hide marital assets and misrepresent his financial position. Daniel's mouth fell open. Therefore, the court is awarding Mrs. Ellison, formerly Mrs. Reeves, 70% of the marital estate, as well as attorney fees, restitution for funds siphoned without her knowledge, and full ownership of the marital home. He shot to his feet. What? That's impossible. She doesn't deserve. Sit down, Mr. Reeves, the judge said sharply. He sat. But the worst blow came next. As for the forged signatures, those issues will be referred for further investigation. He went still. Completely, utterly still. Daniel had entered that courtroom believing he would walk away triumphant. Certain he had buried the truth so deeply no one would ever uncover it. Confident that I would crumble under pressure. Instead, he sat there silent, pale, defeated. The courtroom behind us buzzed with quiet astonishment. And I simply breathed. Not joy. Not triumph. Just release. The fight was over. And I had won by doing the one thing he never believed I could. Telling the truth. But even after the ruling, there was one final moment. Unexpected, quiet, and decisive, that closed the chapter forever. After the hearing, the world seemed strangely quiet. Not empty. Just peaceful. As if someone had turned down the volume on years of noise. Elaine hugged me outside the courthouse. Lily squeezed my hand. Rachel gave me a rare smile. Small but genuine. You handled this with more dignity than most people ever could, she said. And I felt the words settle into me like warm sunlight. I returned to the house. My house. 2 weeks later. I opened the door to rooms filled with memories that no longer hurt. The kitchen where I once cooked for a man who barely looked up from his phone now felt like a place I could reclaim. The garden, long neglected, was waiting patiently for my hands. The home wasn't a monument to a failed marriage anymore. It was a canvas for the life I was about to rebuild. I took my time. I moved through each room slowly, not searching for anything, not fearing what I might find. I was simply present, grounded, free. But the moment that surprised me most came a week later. Daniel showed up at the house. Not with threats. Not with anger. With defeat. He stood on the porch, shoulders sagging, unable to meet my eyes. "Margaret," he whispered. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "There's nothing left to discuss." He swallowed hard, the reality of his downfall etched into the lines of his face. "I never thought you'd fight back. I didn't think you had it in you." I let his words settle. They weren't meant as an apology, they were an admission. The truth he had never said aloud. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain hearing them. I felt gratitude. Because his underestimation had become my liberation. "I hope," I said quietly, "that you learn something from all this." He nodded, barely. Then he walked away. And I closed the chapter with the click of my front door lock. My life since then has been simple, steady, and wholly my own. I rebuilt my routines, replanted my garden, reconnected with old friends, found new hobbies. I didn't rush. I didn't force anything. I let peace return in pieces, the same way pain once had. But the true lesson, the one I carry with me now, came from a realization I didn't expect. If there's anything life has taught me, especially in these later chapters, it's that strength isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't need to announce itself. Real strength is quiet. It's the steadiness of sitting with truth, even when it hurts. It's the resolve to gather facts instead of throwing accusations. It's the patience to build a case brick by brick while someone else believes you're powerless. It's the decision to choose dignity over destruction. Daniel told me I'd leave with nothing. But what he didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, was that I had something he never once possessed. Integrity. And that, ultimately, is what won. Not the money. Not the house. Not the settlement. But the simple, unwavering choice to fight with truth instead of rage. That is the real revenge. That is the real redemption. If you've listened to my story this far, take this with you. Do not underestimate your quiet strength. Do not assume that age makes you fragile. Do not believe for a moment that you have nothing left to fight with. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away calmly, gather your truth, and let the world discover who you truly are. And when justice finally arrives, and it will, you will stand there just as I did. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Simply free. If this story kept you watching, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in the comments.